I struggled with an eating disorder for almost 10 years, but I found my way to recovery and started living again. Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. I'm Fabel. So today I want to share the 3 things I focused on that truly helped me heal and the harsh truths I had to face in order to begin my recovery. But before I get into that, I want to share why it felt so hard for me to even begin recovery. When I was in my eating disorder, the only thing I cared about was chasing and holding on to what I thought was the perfect body. I was willing to give up anything for it: my health, my mind, my energy, my money, and sometimes even my relationships. I isolated myself. I suffered in secret. It consumed my thoughts 24/7. No matter what I was doing, the voice of the disorder was always there in the background, shaping every decision, big or small. I honestly gave everything I had, but it never felt like enough. I never reached a result that truly satisfied me. Even when I told myself that if I just kept pushing, maybe then I'd finally get there, that moment never came. After spending years in that state, I had become so identified with my eating disorder and with how my body looked that the very thought of letting it go and building something new that I knew would feel deeply uncomfortable was terrifying. So terrifying about thoughts like, maybe I'm not that bad. My life isn't really that awful. Gaining weight is actually unhealthy, and countless others started showing up. All of it was just lies my fearful mind was feeding me, and deep down, I knew it. But the fear of losing control over my body, of it no longer meeting my impossible standards, felt unbearable. The idea of eating, truly eating, and allowing myself all kinds of food was so scary. That's why even the thought of recovery filled me with so much resistance. But before I could even take the first real step into recovery, I had to face a couple of truths about myself that changed everything. First, I had to admit to myself that I wasn't happy. For nearly 10 years of living with an eating disorder, I was constantly stressed, anxious, and deeply unhappy. With all the rules, restrictions, expectations, and demands I placed on myself every single day, I was destroying my possibility of joy and fulfillment. But then I started asking myself, why was I so deeply unhappy? I've always loved freedom. Whether I realized it or not, I've always been chasing it. I never really liked being boxed in or told what I could or couldn't do. Do you remember when your parents used to tell you what time to be home or what you should do? Didn't you just wait for the day when you could finally decide for yourself? Do things your own way, in your own time. And how often when someone told you you are going to do this and that's final, did something inside you immediately want to rebel? Or at very least, just have a choice. That's why prison always seemed to me like the harshest, most unbearable punishment, because it strips away your freedom. And when I was in my eating disorder, I was stuck in a prison of my own making. The more restrictions I created, the smaller and smaller my cell became. All the strict daily rules I forced on myself took away the freedom and ease with which life could have flowed. I became rigid, tight, unable to feel and experience life at all. Yes, maybe inside that cell I felt a certain kind of safety, the safety of believing I wouldn't gain weight. But the truth was, I was still in a cell. If someone offered you everything you needed to live well and securely, but with one condition, that you had to spend your entire life inside a prison cell, never stepping out even once, would you take that deal? Especially a woman's body. which almost every day of the month has different needs. When placed in such rigid structure and restrictions, it falls completely out of balance. And living in a body that's out of balance is incredibly hard. It feels much more like surviving than truly living. That's why it's so important to consciously look at these patterns in our lives, even if it feels a little painful to admit they're true. We don't have to rush in and panic or change everything overnight. Sometimes the first step is simply to notice and to acknowledge what's there. The second truth I realized was that I was stuck in a vicious cycle. Nothing new, different, or exciting could happen to me as long as I stayed in it. Back then, routine was everything to me. It gave me a sense of calm and safety, but even the smallest disruption of that routine would trigger huge anxiety and stress. Looking back, I see how many invitations and opportunities I turned down or didn't even notice just because I didn't want to step outside of my routine. Have you ever done that? At that dinner with friends you refused, you might have met your future partner, or someone could have offered you a job or an opportunity that would change your life completely. You might have met your best friend. So many things could have happened. I used to tell myself, but I do go out, I do see people. Yeah, but at what cost? How many conditions did I have to meet before I could even agree to go? How many thoughts and waves of anxiety flooded me beforehand? What if they suggest we eat? What if someone spontaneously offers me food? What if I got home late and I can't fit in my workout? What if we end up somewhere that doesn't have the food I allow myself to eat? And all of this came alongside the constant worry about how my body looked in every single moment. The endless comparing, scanning other people's bodies, watching what and how much they ate. And then there was the terror that someone might make a comment about my own body. With all of those thoughts, even just a few of them, it was almost impossible to truly enjoy someone's company. The truth was, I couldn't genuinely enjoy anything anymore. When I began to notice and reflect on these patterns, it helped me shift my perspective and finally see what was really happening to me. That awareness allowed me to take responsibility and start making the changes I wanted, step by step. So let's look at the first of the three things that helped me in recovery. Over time, I slowly began to realize that the information in my head wasn't fixed. It could be changed. And when I started changing what I was feeding my mind, my thoughts began to shift. As my thoughts shifted, my actions started to change too. The best part of this whole process was knowing it was entirely up to me. What I chose to watch, what I chose to listen to, which thoughts I gave attention to, even the way I responded to certain thoughts and emotion. That was my choice too. I realized that I have the power to reprogram my mind. So, I consciously started planting new thoughts, noticing the old ones and learning not to react to them. There's a quote I love, and back then I used to repeat it often. The mind can be a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. I realized my mind runs on habit. The more I do something, the more it suggests I repeat it. And after 10 years of the same patterns, of course my mind kept telling me to skip breakfast, to count calories, or not to buy the cookies I want. But the more breakfast I ate and the more cookies I allowed myself to enjoy, the quieter those suggestions became. In the beginning, it was incredibly hard. But over time, I realized the more I practice, the easier it gets. The second thing I had to do was really challenging, let me tell you. After so many years of restricting and avoiding it, now I had to do exactly that. eat. When you feared something for so long and convinced yourself it's bad for you, starting to face it feels almost impossible for the mind. But I discovered that with every bite it gets easier. For me, eating turned out to be the key to recovery. The truth I came to understand was simple. I just had to begin. Open the fridge and eat whatever was there. Then go to the store, buy the foods I feared most and eat those too. And do that day after day. Yes, at first I was terrified. I felt like I was doing the worst possible thing. But then I realized it wasn't the end of the world. And no, it wasn't going to kill me. The only way I managed to reprogram my mind and show it that I was no longer afraid of food was by eating. There are no shortcuts. The path is just one. As much as I wish there was another way, as much as I tried to avoid it, the truth was this: I had to eat freely, whenever I was hungry. Strict meal plans and rigid structures could no longer exist for me. If I truly wanted to get back the life I had lost through restriction, the only way was through food. Another thing that was really important was being honest with myself. There were moments when I would start eating, but halfway through, I'd be flooded with panic and fear, and I'd tell myself, actually, I'm full. But when I was really honest, I knew that wasn't true. I knew it was just fear and anxiety talking, and that's exactly why I chose to keep going. I finished my meals, and sometimes I even went back for more. Well, most of the time. I realized that if I kept deceiving myself, letting my mind take the lead under the excuse of this is what I want, I would never truly recover. I had to learn to clearly separate my mind and its thoughts from my true self. The third part of my recovery was movement, or rather, stopping it. For so long, I had trained, run, exercised, anything that would burn calories. The truth was, I had to stop completely. I know it sounds extreme and frightening, but I realized that if I wanted to truly recover and root out compulsive movement, this was the only way. At first, it was so uncomfortable. My body was so used to constant activity, and my mind screamed that if I stopped, something really bad would happen. But I knew that if I wanted freedom, I had to do exactly the things I feared most. And again, honesty with myself was crucial. There was a period when I had technically stopped working out, but suddenly I found myself going on walks that lasted an hour or more every single day. That's when I admitted to myself that this was the same trap, just another way to keep fear and control alive. And I had to stop with the compulsive walks. I also started noticing that I'd add extra chores around the house right after eating, just to make sure I was moving more. I realized that if I let these little loopholes open, I'd never be truly free. I had to face the truth. This wasn't freedom. And I had to stop the chores after eating too. Recovery is not a straight line, but a process of conscious choices. And we have to make these choices every day, with every thought, with every meal, with every movement. Sure, it can be messy sometimes, but it doesn't need to be the worst part of your life. I decided to look at it like taking my life back. And whenever it was tough and challenging, I told myself, yeah, it's hard right now, but this is exactly what I need to do to take my life back. Full recovery is possible for everyone, no matter how many years you have struggled. You just have to decide you want it and start doing the work. But in this case, work is just eating and resting. Tempting, right? Thank you so much for sharing your time with me today, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!